Yes, now it's working.
You look very puzzled.
I was.
I don't want to talk about the content of this because obviously you know a lot more about this than any of us do. And I assume everything you said was absolutely true. So, so that's the way it goes. But I want to talk about several things you did that I think were minor things, I think, but they add up. One of them is when you start a presentation, don't tell us you're going to turn on the machine. That's how you start. And it's really, it had nothing to do with your presentation if you think about it. Everybody in the audience will understand if you walk over and push the button and you have to wait a couple, 2 or 3 seconds. It's important to get off to some kind of a quick start. Now, what that might be, I don't know. That's up to you. But pushing the button was probably, there's nothing horrible about it, but it was kind of a wimpy start, if you see what you know. On the other end of your speech, your conclusion was very abrupt. You just stopped. And it would probably be, since you had a slide that said something about Q&A, that might be a good conclusion, you know. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions or whatever. There's probably some standard way people do that. You've probably seen that before too. I don't know whether, this, to me, it sounded like you were, almost like you were reading an academic article. Now, I'm assuming you wrote it that way, more or less deliberately. Is that a sort of a standard for these presentations? You see what I mean?
Not necessarily.
Okay. If it's not, I recommend you develop a kind of a flow. To me, what was interesting is, first of all, what did you do? Second, why did you do those things? And then, most important of all, what were the results? Now, you had all of those things. You have, in fact, you have a lot of them on in your material and on your slides. But that's where the impact is. If you're selling yourself for this job, that's why you're important. You dreamed up things to do, you had a good reason for thinking you should do those things, and they produced results. And that might be a way to think about organizing this. That would make it flow a little better. I wouldn't change anything at all in the content. You explained exactly what you were doing, but it's just the way it kind of chopped as opposed to flowed, if that makes sense. Visual focus. You spent most of this presentation looking at the slides. Now, I doubt you saw anything on them that surprised you since you created them. You know, so you should probably spend your time looking at the audience, especially since these are people you're trying to influence. You're in effect selling to them, so you should look at them. Obviously, you want to look at each slide as you click the remote to make sure the right one came up. But once you did that, you didn't really have to spend as much time looking at the slides, I guess. There were 2 or 3 times when ovals appeared on a slide, and it was just kind of like, what are those for? And then the next slide actually had the thing the oval surrounded. I don't know if there's a way to fix that or something, but it was kind of mysterious to see those ovals just appear, and then following them, there was the graphic that the oval was supposed to do. Finally, gestures and movements. This may be unconscious, but you spent the entire speech, or maybe 90% of the speech, like this. With your hands like this. You're holding the remote. You had this deck of cards, which you never looked at, as far as I know. And it prevented you from gesturing. And so, since you didn't need the cards, I would forget them. You obviously have to hold on to the remote, but you can make gestures too. And then last, you did something that always scares me when I see people do it. Several different times you cross your feet like that. Now, I'm not saying you're a klutz or anything, but I have actually seen people fall down during speeches when they did that. It's so easy to turn yourself the wrong way and go over. You want your presentation to be memorable, but not for that reason. You know. So, also, you have a habit of kind of cocking your hips like so, and that's a bit too casual, I think, for this kind of a presentation. You're better off keeping your feet underneath your shoulders. That way you're not going to fall over, and you look more authoritative, more professional, I guess, for lack of a better word. All in all, I love the content. I think you've got more than enough. It makes sense, and it has impact. You did important stuff. It's just a matter of just smoothing it out a little bit. I'm probably going to go